What if in midlife dating isn't hard because there are no good men or no emotionally available women, but because we're trying to love with upgraded standards and outdated strategies? And at what point does independence become protection? And when does protection quietly block connection? Welcome to Second Opinion. This is the show where science meets lived experience and where we talk about real life and midlife, not health and isolation, but how hormones work, identity, relationships, and the medical and wellness systems that we move through shape how we feel in our bodies and in our lives. I'm Rosemarie, a healthcare pro and a medical journalist with nearly 30 years in the clinical space, and I've learned that patterns matter and better questions lead to better decisions. Today's conversation is about love, not fantasy, not panic, but emotional maturity, sexual vitality, and what it actually takes to build trust after 40. Today, I'm joined by Shana James, a relationship coach and author with more than 2 decades of experience helping men and women build stronger partnerships. She holds a master's in psychology and a slew of certifications and has worked with thousands navigating dating, long-term relationships, and divorce. Her TEDx talk on the emotional gap between men and women informs this conversation today. If you're dating, partnered, divorced, hopeful, skeptical, or somewhere in the middle, this conversation is for you. Shana, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I went through such a range of emotions as you were reading that whole thing. I mean, I almost cried and then there were some giggles and it's such a tender topic, love, and especially these days, especially for people in heterosexual relationships, there's so much going on.
Yes, there is. So I would love to ask you if you could share how you sort of went down this path of relationship
Yeah.
health.
Well, I will start by saying my parents' relationship is messy and painful. And so I think from a young age, that really launched me in the what I do not want to have be my love life, sadly. But it put me on a journey of like, what is conscious love and how do two people actually come together and stay alive and vital and open-hearted and growing instead of just shutting down and defending themselves against each other. And in my 20s, I was part of a conscious community where we practiced authentic relating and we created workshops around authentic relating for people because we saw that as we were relating to each other and we were willing to get more and more vulnerable and honest and make some messes and be willing to stay to clean them up, that the intimacy deepened and we were growing and we were learning more about ourselves and having more freedom and more pleasure and meaning in our lives. So there were those two originating moments, I would say, that really launched me into this career.
With that experience, thank you for sharing, by the way, what is going on between men and women? It just seems currently in 2026, there's a very tenuous relationship between, especially single men and women.
Well, it's in our culture, right? I mean, it's everywhere. It's like every time there is a movement for someone to feel more empowered, we, I think, kind of throw other people under the bus, right? So I love the Me Too movement. I am all for the Me Too movement. It is so important and necessary. And I believe anywhere or if anyone uses that movement to villainize men, especially women in heterosexual relationships, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. You know, men have to heal for this world to heal. That doesn't mean that every woman has to be part of the healing line for men. I feel like I have a calling and I have, for some reason, a constitution that can do it. I'm privileged in that I didn't have huge trauma growing up, with men. And so I think that it's given me a chance to really see the vulnerable underbelly that every man I've met has, but many, many women don't. And many, many women are subject to violence and dishonesty and all kinds of painful things and trauma, I don't blame anyone. And I think that's actually a part of this is that if we start seeing people as individuals as opposed to grouping people together, right? All men are, all men do this, all women are, all women do this. I think that we start to have more connection available between us.
That's interesting. And I'm glad that you went down that road. I'm also going to read you some data. With what you just shared, Pew Research shows that there's a record high of 40-year-olds who have never been married. What does that signal culturally and not just statistically?
Yeah.
Since
I mean, I think when people look around at relationships that are examples out there, and when you go on dates and you meet people who aren't meeting you emotionally, physically, spiritually, I think people are feeling just tired of it all and they're giving up. And I'm actually working on an honest dating manual right now because I'm like, we've got to do something. We've got to do something about this. People are giving up on love. And I am never one to say people should be in relationships or should have romantic relationships, but there's so much on the table that people are missing out on. So I think it's exhaustion. I think it's defeat. And I think some of it comes from not learning how to speak up for ourselves in a way that has someone else inspired to meet us and co-create something with us. When I look at the examples that I saw growing up, at some point there was a time where I was like, I don't want to do that. Why bother? But then when I started learning how to co-create inspiring, sometimes they were moments, sometimes they were relationships where I felt emotionally met and spiritually met and sexually met, I was like, oh, this is why, it can be sacred. It can be powerful. It can be healing. Like, oh, this is why I would do this. But a lot of people have never had those experiences.
you said so many good things. Giving up on love. I get a lot of feedback from my peers. Well, even married and single are just like this relationship thing, like UTF. Even, like I said, whether you're partnered up or you're alone, the trend from friends from 40 to 60, it sounds like 40, it dips a little bit, relationship satisfaction, but then it goes back up again. Why do you think that is?
Well, okay. So there's the dip, there's the satisfaction. There's also, I've heard a new term recently called menodivorce, which I know you work with hormones and stuff too. So there's something that happens. I mean, I'm in the perimenopause phase where I think as women, we're like, I am done with this shit. I'm done with sacrificing myself. And so that can go one of two ways, right? That can go to we learn to speak up for ourselves and ask for what we want and say, hey, this is painful. This isn't working for me. Or we say, fuck it, and we burn shit down. So I really, when I'm working with a couple where a woman is in that phase, I like to empower her with the tools of honest and vulnerable communication. Because what I find is if we're complaining or we're attacking or we're blaming or shaming a partner, we never get to see if what we really want is possible because they're over there defending themselves against us. And I've been divorced. So after my divorce, I realized I thought I asked and asked and asked for what I wanted, and he wasn't receptive or he couldn't for some reason. So then I went to complaining. And then I went to like, why isn't this happening? Right. What I realized after my divorce is it's more painful to be more vulnerable, but I actually don't have to shut down. It's hard to explain emotionally, unless something, unless someone's gaslighting or unless there is abuse. I feel like for me, for the most part, I create my emotional safety within. So again, that could be controversial. And I'm not meaning to, say to anyone who's experienced trauma or gaslighting that didn't happen. It does. But in a relationship where you actually trust someone at least foundationally and you feel loved and you're not having these dynamics, these traumatic dynamics, I think to put ourselves on the line and say, I'm really hurting. Can you meet me here? Is way more vulnerable than being like, I don't like this. This isn't happening. What's wrong with you? Or why aren't you doing this? Because then we get to feel the power, right? We get to feel the power when we're complaining and we feel raw and vulnerable when we're not. But what I've found is that if we're not vulnerable and we're not opening our hearts, the other person is more likely to shut their heart and defend too, and not get like, oh my God, this is really important, right? This matters. And she's on the verge of leaving because of this. I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like there's so many different pieces in there.
There is so much when it comes to this topic. Like I said, prior to us getting on, I have so many questions. I don't even know. I'm like, do I just put the paper down and just like go with it? Because I feel like Well, you said so many things when we first opened up, and it's like I want to get out of my own head as a journalist because, of course, I have questions that I know people want to hear. But at the same time, you're bringing up all these things. And what comes to me when you were saying giving up on love, or I immediately went to Sex in the City, Charlotte. She was like the forever hopeless romantic. And then, like you said, the Carrie, Samantha, it was like,
Well, and
F
Charlotte
that.
met Harry, which, like, Harry is my example of a Clark Kent. Clark Kent is a super nice guy and one who you would bypass often if you met him. And this is my current partner. We met almost 4 years ago. He was a Clark Kent too. And so I actually had this whole thing last year where I was like, okay, I have to help women look for Clark Kents because they're the ones that know how to commit. They're generous, they're loving, and we get to inspire and call out their superhero qualities. Didn't quite go over that well. I think it felt like too much work for women, but there is something to that. So I added another element, I know, but I think many women don't realize that we can call out a partner's best and that when we see the best in them and we're like, hey, I see you, like, I want that part of you versus why are you doing it this way? Or call them out or call them up versus cut them down. It's a very different experience.
Yeah, I know so many great men and so many great women,
Yes.
and they're all alone. And everyone claims to be doing the work, but then there's still this confusion right now. There's so much information. You just don't know where to take the lead from.
Yeah. Yeah, and information is really different than being able to consciously communicate and regulate your nervous system and open your heart, right? It's like we can read things all day, but um, I'm working with a couple right now, and one of them has done a ton of emotional regulation. And then because they were separated, now they're getting back together. He's like, oh my God, now I have to practice being relational. Like I've been doing it all on my own. It's very different when we start to do it with another person. And okay, am I listening? Am I listening to understand versus, listening to confirm something? Like my passion is actually in a kind of relational, almost a meditation. How do we bring our mindfulness and our presence practices, relationship and communication? Because then we can be heard and understood and supported as opposed to settling for ugh, I guess this is just, this is all I get. This is the way it is. Anytime for any of you listening, if you're settling, ask yourself, what more do I want? And no shame, no blame on either side, but okay, how might I ask for this or how might I inspire this to happen between us
It sounds so much easier
than it feels in the moment? Yes.
than it feels because I'm all about authenticity, that more of that. But then, flip side, when you're out there in the dating world, you're told to be yourself, but not be yourself. This is stuff that you're being fed when you're out there.
It's
What are your
frustrating.
thoughts on that? Like you said, like the Harrys of the world, right? We all want that guy. We all loved him. We
Yeah,
still love
I
Harry.
know.
We're not happy with the way things were going.
Yes. Well, and I love what you brought the distinction between be yourself, but then don't be yourself. So as I'm working on this honest dating manual, I want people to be authentic. I want people to be themselves. I do not want anybody out there trying to put on a facade or be low maintenance or any of that. I think where the distinction comes in for me is, are you being your highest self? Uh, I don't want to be false in any way, but I also know that I have shitty voices in my head that could be communicating, or I could defend, or I could shut down. When my partner and I first started dating, he talked a lot and it totally killed my attraction. And I wasn't sure if it would become romantic because I was like, he's so nice. He was a Harry, right? He was so nice. He was so generous and kind. And I love how he talked about his relationship with his kids and all these things. But I was like, oh, this is, we have this joke because he was standing on my back porch and he was like, well, if you keep me around, I'll help you fix the porch. And literally what went through my head was like, that's really unlikely. But I slowed it down and I took the time and I said to him at one point, I said, I think you're amazing. I really like you. I'm not feeling this romantic connection yet. And I think it might have to do with the way, you chat and you talk fast. And then I was like, I kind of lose you in that. And I really love deep conversations and deep connection. And I said, is that something that you want? Right? Because I'm in the the space of like, I don't make anybody wrong. We might have a difference and that's okay. And if he doesn't want that, there's no part of me that wants to pressure anyone to have that. And he said, I do want that. And I was like, okay, well, would you be willing to practice with me? Could we play with that or work on that? And he was like, yes. And I got to see, and he was like, yeah, I know I have that tendency and I have ADHD and he had his reasons, but he didn't make the reasons more important than the fact that he wanted to connect with me and he wanted me to be happy. I got to see that he was willing to do the work and that he wasn't defensive and all these things. And I think most of us, I mean, I had decades of experience in these authentic relating workshops and with my friends being willing to be a little more vulnerable and a little more honest in a way that created connection instead of like, I don't like the way you do that and it's not working for me. So,
But
yeah.
you know what's kind of sexy about that? I'm going to bring the word sexy because I think it is. You had a boundary, like you spoke up
Yeah.
and you weren't afraid.
A
A
little
lot of
afraid.
women,
I was a
you were a
little
little
afraid.
afraid. Okay, so you were a little afraid, but that right there, just that you had a standard. I mean, a lot of people would just like
Walk away.
you walk away and you wouldn't know what happened. But you are clearly in a healthy mindset and mature that you were able to address it and say, "Hey, this is the situation. You want to work with me or not? Like, what do you want?" I mean, thank you for sharing that because I think that might give some women permission.
Yeah, to speak up. I think we all want the fantasy, or I think most of us want the fantasy of someone's going to read my mind and they're already going to be a custom fit. But I have to say, I feel more loved and cared for and supported than I ever have by this man. And I could very easily have walked away. And so there is a part of me that's like, all right, do not stay with someone whose values don't align. Do not stay with someone who you could never see yourself with, but, give it some time. I talk about two different kinds of potential, one that you should run away from and one that you can really stick around for. The first one is run away from someone who says one thing and does another, or who isn't emotionally available, who can't, have a real conversation with you. But the second kind of potential is when somebody is holding back and not showing you all themselves because they don't want to offend you, they don't want to push you away. But when that's invited, when more of them is invited, they are willing to show up and they're willing to be a little messy and vulnerable with you. And that one is gold. And that's the one that I think, many women walk away from.
Yeah, because you hear,
Yep.
don't date for
Yep.
potential. Don't stick around. You're 40, 50, 60. You don't have time for that. But the reality is, like you said, we do have so much life that we were lifing up until this point that I think it behooves you to be a little, I say guard it, but not in a negative way, but more in a boundary way.
Yeah. And just a little slower.
Slower.
Right? Not basing it on like, "Ooh, is this hot?" When I really look back at my marriage, I think I chose him. There was a deep emotional connection, but I was like, "Oh, I'm supposed to find someone who it's hot with because he's the only person maybe, unless we open our relationship, which some of that's fine and some of that happened but like, that's going to be my person to have sex with." And now, after my divorce, I was like, okay, chemistry is important, but I actually also know that I can build chemistry more than most women realize, I think. Again, we're not taught how to use our presence and our inspiration and our body and our, pleasure and all of that. But I think there's so much more that we can create that I decided I'm going to put on my big girl panties and I'm going to look for partnership qualities and build attraction and let it be a little slower, but also be honest along the way and say, I don't know where this is going. No one knows where it's going in the beginning of a relationship. It's discovery, right? So I'm not committing myself to anything. I'm just committing myself to, hey, are we in this for another date? Are we in this moment together? And if we decide we want to commit to more, we can talk about that. But I think people also get caught up in if I say yes, I'm stuck here versus I'm never stuck if I, don't make myself stuck.
Yeah, because, I wrote something down in the beginning on like the wider lens are people more aware and less willing to tolerate dissatisfaction?
That's a
Like,
great question.
yeah, like that just made me think of that.
Yeah. I think we are aware. And I love that. Like, I don't want people to tolerate dissatisfaction. I just want people to speak up about it in a more mature and inviting way. And I think because many of us have not been met with, of course, I want to respect you. Of course, I want to love you and care for you, right? That isn't necessarily our history. And so it can feel like we have to like put up our dukes and sort of fight it out, or we have to be loud or fierce in order to be strong. And there's so much strength that can come through an open hearted boundary.
I feel again we have all this programming. Even when you do the work, you're never done the work. But
Never.
even when you've done the work, you really learn more about yourself in relation than when you are right than when you're
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
So, because you work with men primarily, men and women, but primarily men, is there something that you hear when working with men? Is there something that women are missing along the way that men wish that women knew?
Yeah. I think men often feel blamed. And again, rightly so. There's so many things that happen, but in the history and in our culture and with many men in our, in our past, but I think men often feel objectified in a way where it's like, who are you going to be for me? Are you going to be a baby daddy? Are you going to be a wallet, a caretaker? Like there are ways that men feel objectified too. And there are ways that men feel misunderstood and unseen. I dated someone after my divorce who said until me, he'd never cried with a woman without her shaming him. Like a bunch of different women in his life had shamed him for opening up and being vulnerable. And, we want vulnerability, but oftentimes when men bring it, there's a like, shit, what do I do with this? Or now has my rock faded? This man isn't my rock anymore. I can't count on him. Now he's a blubbering whatever. So I think men want women to know it, again, if we're going back to the heterosexual dynamic, that just because they feel vulnerable or they cry or they open up and they get raw, it doesn't mean that they can't come back to that strength. And that's what I see as really powerful in relationship when we can hold that space for each other and also have external outlets, right? Like I have my friends, my partner has his men's circle, I have women's circles and all kinds of things. But when we can also have a sense of humanity, like in order for me to get the full power and dynamism of any man in my life, I also have to welcome some of his vulnerability, at least some of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that men often feel like that, women want that, but then when I show it, they run away or they tell me I'm weak or, not masculine enough.
Interesting. So, midlife, we're all pretty accomplished by this time, right? We've got the degrees, we've got the street cred, we're okay at our job, right? Nothing's perfect, but
Nothing's
for the
perfect.
most part, we feel a little more confident in our professional life. The reality is now we're talking perimenopause, menopause, andropause, and all of these fun biological things that are going on with our body. So, with that, how does all of this affect like emotional reactivities? Like you're talking about men, because also as a woman, uh, I definitely want to stick to the men because I feel like we're both vulnerable.
Yeah.
However, we handle things differently as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there anything you'd like to speak on when it comes to all these hormonal changes?
Yes. I mean, first of all, I don't know about you, but I've gone through hell and back and it's not over.
No.
Between the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, the brain fog, the lack of energy, I mean, it's been hard for me, and I feel some shame around that at times too.
And lady, we're living here because we had all, you grow up, the preteen, the teen, all the other things. And now we're going to be living in this, even on the other side. I mean, this is our last phase, right? So, but in a beautiful way, not in a negative way, but
No,
like
it can be beautiful,
it
but
can
when
be
we don't talk
beautiful.
about it, then it feels like hell, and when we don't know what's
Yes.
happening in our bodies, and when doctors are like, "No, you're
It
too young
sucks.
for that," I'm like, yeah, it's horrible. Anyway, so fortunately, my partner has been very, very loving and steady, and I think it's a phase. I wrote some articles that are on my website around why menopause and perimenopause actually doesn't have to be the end, and it can be a completely new relationship that goes deeper into these emotional realms, into intimacy. because, we're all sort of depending on that cascade of chemicals and chemistry in the beginning. And so sometimes we don't actually have deep intimacy. So there's an opportunity when we can navigate the reactivity and be conscious about it as women. This is probably one of the hardest things to do. But when you can, meditation helps this for me a lot. When I can witness, like, oh my God, I feel rage right now. I am seeing red. I want to rip your face off to me. But when I'm speaking about it rather than from it, right? When I'm like, you're an asshole or any of those things, uh, it breaks trust unless you have a relationship, and this is totally possible too, but if you have a conscious relationship where you have an agreement and you have practiced or you're practicing, I'm going to express all the intensity of emotions and the partner is actually up for that and we use it to grow and heal together, that's one thing. And there are ways that you can set that up and create that. But most people have never heard of that. And so they're like, that sounds insane. And yet I still don't know what to do with my emotions. So I work with a lot of people, especially in this phase, to go deeper and really see what is underneath this anger, this rage, this agitation. Oftentimes, especially for women, it's this place where we've sacrificed ourselves. Like I said before, we're tired of it. We are not willing to do that anymore. And yet the pendulum shifts from like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to fuck that. I am not taking this shit anymore. And I always go back to the middle way. Because there is a middle way that's like, yes, this is my boundary. I will not sacrifice myself. And how do I navigate this with another person with love instead of with my, 13-year-old self who's driving the bus and creating chaos?
Okay, so with that, so women can have a little understanding into this with men and how we deal with things. I want to talk a little bit about attachment styles in case somebody isn't familiar about that, how maybe these hormonal shifts might affect attachment styles, or do they?
I mean, for me, I know that I definitely have felt more anxiety in the hormone shifts and the anxious, part of the anxious attachment style is often more of the way that the feminine expresses itself. And I don't see the feminine as just women. I think we all have feminine, masculine, but there is a kind of feminine quality of I'm trying to get something and I don't know whether you're here and I don't feel safe. I don't feel connected. And oftentimes the masculine is the one who's more distant or avoidant. I never like to make generalizations though. So, feel into your own self with no judgment of which one do I play? Which role do I play? And I play different roles at different times in relationships. In the beginning of a relationship, I'm much more anxious. As it goes on, I tend to become a little more avoidant. Some of that's my steadiness and my anchor and kind of, in some of those terms of just being able to witness a lot of it. And some of it is an avoidance that I know I have. But my partner and I are willing to talk about those things. I'm like, oh, I'm having a sort of anxious moment and, will you appreciate me or will you love me or will you something, right? Or I'm having an avoidant moment and some part of me wants to run away right now, but I'm going to pause. I'm not going to run and let's stay here and see if there's anything we can support each other with. And at some point, I might tap out and be like, I'm going to come back later. So again, I really feel like learning to regulate our nervous systems in the presence of another person is huge. And then also being willing and able to lovingly communicate while all of this chaos is happening is a huge part of it also.
Yeah. So I think because you brought up the masculine and feminine, and I feel like so many women, if you're in midlife, you're single, you're probably living in your masculine because you're doing for yourself. Like you, I don't want to generalize, but it's almost survival.
I've had to do that too as a single mom. And right, it's like I have to be more oriented around accomplishing and survival and money and all of that.
I'm going to go to the internet because I feel like we get all these snippets of things. As a woman who runs a lot in her masculine in work, we're just in sheer protection mode a lot of times.
Yes.
Because there's information circulating, at least I've seen. If a man's really in his masculine, then a woman can be in her feminine. Say if this is a yardstick and you want a masculine man to extreme ends of each other. Right? To get a masculine man, you have to be completely in their feminine, and the closer you are to the middle, the more feminine of a man you're gonna, you know. And I feel like for women, that's a real hard concept to like switch off and on. So could you
Totally.
speak on that a little bit, and maybe some frustrating situations from the men that you're coaching?
Yeah, and first I just want to speak to choice because there's nothing wrong with, running our lives. And if we want to be, and this is why the masculine feminine sometimes for me breaks down because it's like I can be in my feminine and achieving and accomplishing, right? There's no part of me that says like only masculine does that. But I'll say for myself right now, I'm in a practice of is there a way that I can soften I'm doing things so that I create less pain and friction in my own body and in my own heart. And everybody's different, everybody's unique. So, whatever blend of masculine and feminine you have, I mean, for me, sometimes I look at it as, okay, if I can choose the moments when I want to feel a little more soft or surrendered or open, then I don't have to stay there all the time if I don't want to. Maybe it feels good. I mean, I think for me, it actually would feel good to stay there a lot more than I do. But for some women, it's like, nope, I want to be there in this moment and over here in this moment, and that's fine. So I do agree that there is a tendency if we're if I'm like, I got it, I'm gonna bring my more structured survival self to a date, then men who feel more masculine to us, they're gonna be like, okay, like the juice isn't often there as much. And we tend to attract some of those men who are a little more nice and in their hearts. But those are the ones who I think of like Harry and Clark Kent, where it's like, okay, so as you start to relax and soften and receive and feel safe, they can step up into their power and their clarity and their strength and all of that. I don't know. I may be confusing things a little more because I don't want to make it that anyone has to be any specific way, which is why, again, I go back to choice. Are you stuck, like you said, in a survival pattern? And if so, what needs to shift for you? No blame, no judgment of yourself, but like, what's one thing you could do to bring more ease and pleasure and joy to your life? For yourself first, not just for whatever, person your partner you're going to end up being with, but just for you so that you can have that first. Then that starts to do the magnetic thing of call in someone who's attracted to that.
You worded that nicely because, of course, I was researching, reading articles, anecdotally, getting the temperature of the room. I'd love for you to speak on this because women don't feel like they're stepping up, whether they're not approaching them. They want to be approached, they want to be in their feminine, but for some reason, is it and then I talk to single men. They're like, well, I don't want to seem like a creeper. I don't want to seem aggressive. So I feel like then there's like a whole lot of inaction and all these single people.
Yep. I know this is why I almost cried as you were reading your introduction because I mean, maybe it's kind of we're at a tipping point, right? And I feel like that's why I'm wanting to create this honest dating movement where we just say, you know what? Can we just drop the assumptions and the judgments and the defenses? Again, not that you can't protect yourself at all. Of course you can,
I hear you.
right? The
Yeah.
already assuming you're going to be a certain way. I mean, because I feel like that's what I did differently when I went on dates. It was like, I'm really curious to see who this person is, and I want to appreciate them for who they are, even if they're not a fit for me. And that means sometimes I had 15-minute dates or 30-minute dates. Like I did not, I was dating with a young child too. So I was like, I'm not going to waste any extra time here. But that also doesn't mean I have to be rude to anyone because then we're sending people back out into the dating pool and this man's going to be a perfect fit for someone else, but he's going to feel defeated because I've shit on him, right? Like I feel like we've got to do our best to lift each other up. And I don't know. I mean, I actually am creating a structure for a date that someone could invite someone else into, like a more of a discovery based date versus like, let's figure out the outcome here. Let's figure out, are you the one? And like, how do we bring this more compassionate and honest parts of ourselves without lowering our standards, actually raising our standards, right? We want to be met. how do we speak up and how do we be honest and how do we set aside? I think some of it is setting aside that box of all men are, all women are, and really opening ourselves to get to know the person in front of us with like a welcoming and a desire to really like, I really want to know you. Who are you? You know, what inspires you? What matters to you? Like, tell me about yourself. And people respond differently than when you're sitting there like, prove yourself to me or, tell me like interview style. Like I need to know that you're trustworthy, right? Versus like, okay, what really makes you you? I will learn if you're trustworthy. But if I'm skeptical and cynical, that part's not gonna come out of someone.
No. And it's almost like there's a whole even other step before we get to that, because I'm thinking that there's so many people, even to get to that point, we're in the discovery
Yeah,
phase.
where you're there. Yep.
Right, where you're there, because from just my little research, my own anecdotal little, survey taking and chatting before this conversation is that there's so many women that they're in their, like, 40s and 50s. They've been through it, now they're on the other side, they're dealing with menopause, and they want a relationship. However, the sad part is they want connection, but they're also good. Like, I just got my house. I just I got this promotion. I'm almost done the book, or I got this agent, or, I
Yeah.
have this
I
opportunity.
don't need.
Yeah, they don't need, and then scared because they're afraid that if they put themselves out there, they're going to get distracted and someone's going to rip their peace away again. Like,
Yeah.
they've worked so hard to get to that peace, where how many times and again did they try? So I feel like we're not even like we're like stuck now because everyone's okay. And so we're not even venturing out because we're just so afraid of losing that,
Yeah.
again, peace. I keep going to that word.
Well, and I think that's a really valid point. I think for me, I did get to that kind of peace and I made my peace with like, if I don't have love again, it's okay. I love my life. I love my friends. I love my spiritual practice. I love my work. Like I am okay no matter what, you know? And I
Yeah.
think, and as I started dating again, and I see this with every woman I coach, the anxiety comes back in. Am I still okay? Well, now I was having peace and now I'm on this roller coaster of emotions and wondering if they're going to text me or call me or like, how did this go? And am I making a good impression or not? Theory or my sense of that is it's a spiritual practice or it's a growth practice, however you want to frame it. If you actually use that as a practice of growth or spirituality, it changed everything for me. Because then instead of being like, ugh, shit, now I'm anxious, I'm like, oh, now I'm anxious. Let me actually look deeper and see what's actually going on. Right? Yes, I did my work and while I was divorced, I did my work on my own. It wasn't until I got back into dating and relationships that I had to do more work. I had to do different work. Those attachment wounds and the things that are triggered relationally, which is most of our wounds, to be totally honest,
Yeah.
then those come to the front and center. But when you have someone to walk you through that, I think that's why I love doing coaching with people who are in their 40s and 50s. And they're like, I want that peace back. And I'm like, great, let's find it for you. Let's make it so that it is, I don't know if unshakable is the right word. That feels like a trendy word, but it's like, not that it's never going to be shaken, but let's find the ground that for the most part, you don't lose that peace, even in the fear of someone not choosing you, even in a fight with your spouse, even in, I'm going to lose my house, like whatever it is, the deeper peace is something that we can find. And that if we use dating to find that instead of just fretting about the fact that that's happening, that changes everything.
How do I say this? Well, you can work on yourself and date at the same time. It's not like you work on yourself shelf dating. It's almost the intersection, like the difference. How do you say therapy and coaching? What are the differences between the two?
What I was just thinking as you said that is dating can be like relationship practice, or, you can be very honest when you're on a date. If you say like, I I don't wanna do it the way I've done it in the past, and so I'm practicing again. I really want this to be real, or I wanna get to know you for real. Like, I think so many people think that they have to go out there and just say, "I'm ready for a partnership," and that's it, and I think we can cut each other a little more slack if we're being honest with each other, right? If somebody says, "I want a partnership," and then they cheat or they show that they're not ready for a partnership, like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But what about we go out and we, practice connecting in such a way where we get a little bit more vulnerable and we test the waters and we see, are we being met? And then we share a little bit more of ourselves and we find a way that we can feel safe with ourselves so that we can be more open and vulnerable when we choose, again, when we choose to, not like we have to just go, I'm going to open myself to anyone. No, we want to do it as we're feeling safe with someone.
I'm hearing what you're saying, feeling safe, because a relationship for men and women, a bad one. I mean, as we know, right, can really set you over the edge, and it can
Yeah.
take years to get over a bad
Yes.
divorce or
Yes.
betrayal. We're not going to solve this, in one podcast hour. But I think for people listening, I think they're like, how do I even get past these trust issues?
Okay, I have 2 things for that. One is I have clients who've been in challenging relationships in the past make a list of the red flags that they overlooked because oftentimes we saw them and for some reason we did not name them or we just overlooked them. So as you start to rebuild trust with yourself, I did see this. Why didn't I speak up about it? Why didn't I pay attention to that? And then we start to work with that underlying material so that you have your voice, so that you have you can create your own safety. Then it's easier to go out in the world and start trusting, oh, I could be with someone else and take care of myself. The other thing I have people do is make a list of what are the dynamics that did not work for you in past relationships. You can just draw this for yourself if you want, like in 4 columns. First column is what dynamics did I not like, were disappointing, didn't work for me. Second column, so where it gets a little harder, is what was my role in that dynamic? Because every time we, look at someone else and we say that person is to blame, we are disempowered. And so we have to understand, how did I co-create that dynamic? Otherwise, we just step in the shit all over again. And then the third column is, what do I want next? Instead of that unsatisfying dynamic, what do I actually want instead? And then the fourth column we often do together, which is, what is my first step toward that, right? What's the baby step? Because there's this big vision and this is what I want. What's the next step as I'm moving toward that? So you can use that for yourself. It's been super helpful for, many, many of my clients and even people who came to a consultation and never worked with me. They're like, oh, this was this is super helpful.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so make the list. Like you said, chances are, if we get really honest with ourselves, we know, but for whatever reason, but that's part of the work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
the whole
no, not
process,
blaming yourself or being mean to yourself about why
right?
you didn't address it. Just like so much compassion. Oh my gosh. I mean, my mom was very, very critical. And so being with someone who was critical, just it made sense. That's kind of what felt like love, unfortunately, right? I have to relearn that pattern, that kind of criticism is not actually love. So we have to really look at, with compassion, why did I make those choices?
You are about to go out on a date and you're exciting because, it doesn't happen often. A lot of the women I tend to know they're very busy and it's like scheduling. It becomes a job actually when you decide. Then there's this, oh, I have to make dating a priority. Like, how do we, just look at dating and a first date maybe as just
Differently.
differently? Okay, that's a really good point. Like, because it seems like then there's also like a lot of first dates and we don't get past that.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about this is another reason I started writing this manual because I was like, okay, I'm always feel scared to say this, but dating has been lovely for me in so many ways, and I think the reason is I have I have really high expectations and also high compassion. So, when I'm on the apps or when I was on the apps, I was feeling through each person, like energetically. I was getting a sense of who is this person? I can feel them through their communication. So I was tuning into that. And then I also paid attention. How did they respond? Were they also curious? Did they ask me questions? Is this someone who cut through my filter of I am going to actually be willing to take a half hour out of my day and get to know this person? So I was not messing around, right? I have a family member who's LGBTQ plus. And so I was like, I would say that after a message or two, I was like, hey, this is my situation and I really need to be around people who celebrate this. And if that isn't you, like, I bless you. I wish you the best, right? But I needed to have like a limiter again so that I could see how do people respond. And I didn't say it in a rude way, like, you better be on board with this, but it was just like, hey, what's your sense of this? And does this matter to you? So you can really feel through as you're communicating. Then also I had, 30-minute dates, coffee dates. I did not invest heavily until I had a sense, okay, this is someone who can meet me emotionally or intellectually. Before that, it was kind of just, let's just see if there's something here.
So it's interesting that you said that because I hear you, the 30-minute coffee date. And then you have another extreme. I've talked to people where they've had these long conversations with people before they even met. And then it's like nothing. It's really wild how you can have, you have 30-minute dates and then you can talk to somebody for 5 hours. And then that doesn't work. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm just sharing like different
It's so
things,
hard.
situations. It's so hard
It's so
with,
hard.
and I think everybody wants to do everything right. There's your time's precious, my time's precious and valuable. And so everybody goes into this whole situation.
Let it go. Don't try to get it right. There's no right. There's no right. There's just like, can you, how could you date so that you could enjoy yourself? Not with the people who are, shitty or like, don't even go there, but, find some 1-degree shift that makes this more enjoyable for you. What would that be? It might be having coffee with a girlfriend and then going to a quick date and then coming back to the girlfriend because at least then, even if it sucked or if it wasn't what you wanted it to be, like you still have an experience of being with someone who loves you and supports you and understands you. I don't know, whatever it is. Or you like, you dress up and you feel lovely for yourself and then it's not even about that person. Or you wear your sweatpants and you're like, I'm going to bring me for real and see how it goes. I don't know, but really feel into like what could make this more enjoyable for you as opposed to what makes it feel like a job and extra stress.
The great thing about midlife is that you know what you want. And then the bad thing about midlife is that you know what you want. So we have these checklists. I mean, where's the fine line with having a boundary and getting on a date? I'm learning all these terms, by the way. I didn't even know what half these things were, goes to show you where I am in this conversation.
Yeah.
But there was trauma dumping, floodlighting. Don't do this. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of touched upon that in the beginning. What are maybe some of the things that women should be considering and they're not considering? Chemistry over compatibility.
Yeah. As I've been thinking about this and writing about this more, I am into compatibility over chemistry. Like that zing or that flash it's something, but it doesn't show that so, charm doesn't really tell you who a person is, nor does chemistry. It's one indicator, right? But there's a whole dashboard. And so I would just say, look for people you actually feel like you can relax with. You feel like there's a friendship that could build, that somebody really cares about you. And if you have to do the work to reorient yourself to actually start to find Clark Kent's more attractive, I can do that with you. I mean, that's actually fun. It's actually fun and pleasurable, right? So again, there's no right way to do it, but just notice if you're looking for that shallow, like lightning bolt of chemistry versus are you actually paying attention to deeper? And if you are and you're listening to this and you're like, Shana, come on, I already know that. Then what I would say to you is, what would I say? I think I would go back to, again, find what makes it more meaningful and enjoyable to you. I mean, I'm happy to have a conversation too if anybody has like specific situations, because again, it's always hard to speak to everybody. But I would say that for me, what really made the shift after my divorce was deciding that I was gonna go out and look for partnership qualities and not get as distracted by this hot right away. And it shifted things for me. And I had some really beautiful connections, and some people turned out to be friends, and some people turned out to be, people who also had LGBTQ family members. And so we were, became allies together. And then one of them actually became an amazing partner. But, it took a couple more dates than I think I would have given it when I was younger to really just give him time to show himself to me and to see that some of those men who are quieter or less alpha really have a lot more than they're showing, because some of them are terrified. Men are being bashed out there and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And I don't want to be a creep or an asshole either, because I want to, I don't want to affirm what these other men are doing.
Yeah. Okay, for sake of time, I
Yeah.
am keeping an eye on time.
Okay.
There's a lot more. I think we might have to have a two-parter. There's one, I have to get in a funny kind of a question that my old news director asked. She goes, "Well, how do I meet someone if I don't want to go online, but I also don't want to leave my house?" She's very funny. I'm like, "I'll see what I can do."
And it's also like, okay, we have to be willing to do something, but also get creative. If you're like, "You know what? I'm not willing to leave my house and I don't want to be online." Okay, so what else can I do? Maybe I go to a virtual meetup group. I'm going to start these honest dating virtual events that they're not going to be like speed dating, but it's going to be bringing people together who want to date more consciously and honestly, so they can see, like, how do I open more? How do I, practice some of these intimacy skills, not sexual intimacy, just like relational intimacy, right? Yeah, be creative and know that anything is possible and find ways that actually excite you, right? So maybe she does join some virtual things and not have to leave her house. I mean, I would say anything is possible.
Yeah, she's funny. She's not a regular. She's got a very busy job. She runs an entire news station.
Yeah.
Because of that, she doesn't want to leave her house
Right.
after
Right.
work.
She's
That's
exhausted.
it.
She
She's
also
exhausted.
may want to look at, and for those of us who are working ourselves to the bone, sometimes we want to look at, do I really want to work myself to the bone? Maybe I love what I do, and maybe I love this position. I love all the things, but is there a way this could be easier? Or is there a way I could be less tired at the end of the day? If I really want love in my life, is there a way that I want to make some kind of shift so I put some energy there?
All right. Well, what does it look like? Because you brought up a program that you're going to be opening up. So, how does somebody work with you? I know you had a slew of information on your website.
I mean, step one, I have all different kinds of programs and courses and things. So I would say step one is just, schedule a consultation with me. You can either, I'll send you the quizzes that I have. You can take a quiz that is what's keeping you from having the best love and sex of your life, or if you're looking for love, what might be blocking you from finding love. Either one of those will offer you a consultation with me at the end that we can go over your results. And if you're not interested in taking the quiz and you just want to reach out to me, you can go to my website, shanajamescoaching.com, and contact me. I've got 400 or so podcast episodes. Some of them are geared toward men, though a lot of women have listened to them because they're like, "Ooh, I want to hear what men are learning." My new podcast is called Practicing Love. And so there's, I think, 40 or so episodes where people are talking about what are they practicing in their love lives. Because I don't think we ever finish, like you said. We don't get to the point where we're not working on ourselves anymore. And so then as we consciously bring our work into relationship, that's where I say that we're practicing love.
Love it. Is there something that we didn't talk about today that you felt like you wanted to get across,
Mm.
knowing that you were coming on?
So interesting. I tend to just more go with the flow and the questions. So I didn't have anything where I was like, "Oh, I have to talk about this." But if there was something to end on, I think it's, again, going back to, being uniquely you. I never want anyone to feel like they have to put on a mask or a facade or, be a certain way, and consider, right, what is I don't want to say the deepest version of you versus the one that, gets grumpy and bitchy and all those things. We have those, right? We're not going to do away with those, but are we communicating from those? Are we dating from that skepticism and cynicism? Or are we dating from something else is possible? And if that feels stuck, if it's vulnerable. I've been working with a dear friend of mine on this, where she's feeling hopeless and there's a lot of grief and it hasn't worked out in the past. And we continue to have these conversations where I'm like, okay, let's open this up and talk about it, right? Because that's how we heal our hearts, is having someone there to hold it with you.
Got it. Well, one last question before we go. I promise this is an easy one. For the sake of the show, it's called Second Opinion. What is some of the best dating advice a client has come to you with that they have gotten in the past, or the worst,
Good question.
or that you took? Maybe we've all taken some bad and good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst advice I hear is that you're supposed to emulate somebody else, right? Like I've often said to men, if you're trying to be someone else, it's like being a tall, thin man wearing a short, wide man's pants. Like they're not going to look good on you. They're not going to feel like you. And then you're just going to push people away because they're going to feel that dissonance, right? From who you're being. The best advice I would say is to not have to hide your vulnerability or your awkwardness. And when we think we're supposed to keep it all together, it feels like so much pressure. So really to go in and say, I'm feeling a little nervous right now. Are you feeling nervous? I wonder how we could have this conversation and like just be real together instead of making our awkwardness feel like something we have to hide. Even that can really shift a connection. And someone who doesn't want that, you'll, pretty automatically, that person will filter out. But someone who does want that will be like, oh, thank you. Thank God. Yes, that's what I want too.
Love it. All right, we're going to end on that note because that was something positive. With that, that is a wrap of this episode. Dating after 40 is layered. Love comes with context, careers, kids, history, patterns, a life that's already in motion. That doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it real. And honestly, a little more interesting. Shana, thank you so much for bringing depth and practicality to this conversation. You made this feel very grounded without also oversimplifying it as well. If this episode resonated with you, like, share, leave a review. It really helps keep these conversations going and gets this information to the people who are searching for it. This is Second Opinion, where age is always the advantage and experience always counts. Until next time.